Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you for coming, everyone. It gives me great pleasure to introduce Tapan. Tapan is an engineering manager with deep experience in building and scaling payment systems, including the biggest payment system there is in the world, which is Visa and VisaNet. With a background that spans global enterprises and early stage startups, he brings a well-rounded perspective to technical and organizational challenges. He holds an engineering master's degree, which grounds his practical work in strong technical foundations. Tapan is going to be talking about something that actually people rarely think about. So when you kind of think about banking and payments, you kind of think, oh, well, you know, like I have the centralized infrastructure, all of this kind of stuff. But he's going to talk about a practical application where things that you don't think matter actually cause some significant problems for payment systems. So without further ado, over to you, Tapan. Thank you.
Thank you, Karthik. Hi, everyone. I'm Tapan. I build payment systems, which is really a fancy way of saying that I spend my days making sure that when you send money somewhere, it doesn't just vanish into a black hole, bounce into the wrong account, or get intercepted by someone who thinks your money should be their money. Today we are going to zoom out beyond just our code, because as much as we love our own stack, payments don't happen in isolation. They touch dozens of external systems, vendors, and networks we don't really control. That's exactly where some of the biggest failures hide. So let's set the stage. This talk is about threats that you can't just patch with one quick code commit. The vulnerability that live outside your direct control, but still can blow your payment security. We're talking vendors, APIs, processors, third-party scripts, the stuff you don't really own, but absolutely depend on. We'll walk through some real industry case studies where external weaknesses cascaded into catastrophic payment failures. And I don't mean small hiccups. I mean headlines, fines, and lost trust. Then we'll put the key learnings, the patterns, the warning signs, and strategies that you can actually take home to bulletproof your own payment ecosystem. All right, let's walk through what actually happens when a payment moves from click to cash. It all starts with a user, someone ready to hand over their hard-earned money. Simple, right? Not quite. They interact with your website or mobile app, your front door. Any glitch or injected code here, game over before you've even begun. This request then flows into your CRM systems. These systems are storing customer profiles, loyalty data, order history, a treasure chest for attackers, if it's not well locked down. Next, we move into backend dependencies. Dozens of microservices, APIs, third-party plugins. This is where the complexity explodes, where hidden security gaps love to hide. Then comes the cart and checkout flow. This is what we call the conversion zone. Secure elements, tokenization, PCI compliance, every pixel, every call matters here. The payment processor gets the handoff, translating your transaction into the right payment rails. These are your Stripe of the world. If they go down, you go down. Next are the payment networks, Visa, MasterCard, etc. These are global pipes that connect banks running millions of transactions per second. Your customer's bank now verifies identity, checks funds, approves or declines payments. Fraud detection kicks in here, and it is often opaque to you. Once approved, funds settle to your merchant account. Finally, it lands into your accounting system, reconciling, reporting, and making sure your books are matching with the bank's records. And here's the kicker. Every single arrow between these blocks is a potential failure or an attack point. That's why designing for resilience is vital. So far, we've talked about the full journey of the payment system, from user clicks all the way to cash hitting your merchant account. But not all parts of the journey are created equal when it comes to risk. On the right, we have the major security investments that are often prioritized. That's standard and necessary. To be fair, these areas do involve high stakes, financial operations, and that's why they are heavily regulated, monitored, and hardened, which is a great thing. To your left, though, is where the attackers often exploit. These parts are exposed to the users, and ironically, the weakest links are often closer to the user. That's where most real-world attacks happen, not by breaking the bank, but by slipping through overlooked gaps between your internal systems. So our focus area would be on the left side. We'll concentrate on the parts upstream of the actual payment processing, because that's where we have the most control and also the most exposure. So moving into the case studies now. Fraud isn't always an external hack. It's often driven by business logic vulnerability arising at the seams of interconnected payment systems. Let's walk through a real-world example of how flawed business logic in payment flows can create massive financial exposure. In 2021, Revolut's payment systems in the US and EU operated independently with no direct communication between them. This separation created a blind spot in how transactions and refunds were reconciled. So what happened was criminals found a logic gap in the flow between two region systems. Here's a key flaw. They made high-value purchases with accounts linked to the US payment system. The US side would then correctly decline these charges due to insufficient funds or other checks that were put in place. However, the EU side, receiving only part of the transaction data, erroneously processed a refund as if it was a valid purchase that was made. This resulted in attackers receiving money back for purchases that never actually went through. How it worked was a lack of real-time reconciliation between US and EU platforms. The refund logic assumed trust in the other systems and the transaction outcomes without confirming settlement. The integration points here were a security blind spot. Ownership of the gap between the systems wasn't very clear. The impact was that fraudsters siphoned off over 20 million in invalid refunds. The affected merchants and banks bore heavy operational and financial losses. Before the money, the incident highlighted how business logic errors, not just hacking or credential theft, can cause major breaches in payment security. Sorry about that. So the key lessons that we could learn from this are: always design payment flows with end-to-end validation across regions and systems. Treat cross-system communication as a high-risk integration point and implement fail-safe measures. Test not just security exploits, but also business logic scenarios where data mismatches could lead to a loss. Moving on to the next case study. Let's break this one down. In 2018, British Airways fell victim to a MageCart-style attack. And this is a textbook example of how a single weak link in your supply chain can blow the back doors wide open. So in 2018, peak travel season, an attacker found an outdated, buggy, third-party JavaScript library in the airline's web infrastructure. This wasn't some deep core British Airways code. This was a dependency that should have been patched. Instead, it became like a perfect injection point. How did it happen? They slipped in malicious code right in the payment page. The code that ran silently in the customer's browser. When the passenger typed in their credit card details, the data was whisked away in real time and the attacker's own fraudulent payment workflow. The kicker, the legitimate BA payment page still worked perfectly. Customers got their tickets while attackers got away with the payment data. The overall impact was estimated to be around 100,000 customers losing their payment credentials and PII information, which is personally identifiable information. This is not just a PR nightmare, it's regulatory fines, brand damage, and a masterclass in how external components can sync your payment security. The lesson to learn here is a single outdated library, even one tiny gap in monitoring, can lead to a catastrophic breach. Let's rewind to May 2015, when Starbucks learned the hard way that convenience without security is an open door for attackers. Starbucks had an auto-reload feature, a well-intentioned UX perk, where if your account balance dipped, it would automatically pull money from a linked credit card or a bank account. It's great for coffee addicts, but terrible if you're a fraudster for a bottomless wallet. Here's what happened. Attackers used credential stuffing and brute force attacks to break into Starbucks accounts with weak reused passwords. This information was found from previous breaches in many major retail stores. Generally, people like to keep the same passwords across their apps, so this was an easy entry point. There was no MFA in place, so one correct password and they were in. Once inside, they enabled and abused auto-reload to continuously siphon funds into the Starbucks account, and then quickly transferred that balance to other accounts, gift cards, under their control. Because the funds were reloaded automatically and instantly, it became self-feeding fraud loop until the linked payment source ran dry or was blocked. The impact was huge. 1.5 million accounts targeted, with both direct financial loss and a massive hit to customer trust. This incident became a textbook example of how a small overlooked feature in the payments flow can be weaponized at scale. The key takeaway here is any integration that moves money automatically, no matter how small the amount, needs friction, verification, and real-time fraud detection, baked in from the very first day. Let's talk about another case where a web platform gap turned into a full-blown payments and crypto breach. In March of 2023, right after Google Domains migrated accounts to Squarespace, there was a period where verification checks on domain transfers weren't as tight as they should have been. That gap was all the attackers needed. Fraudsters initiated domain transfers to their own registrar accounts without real owner ever getting, or in some cases needing, meaningful verifications. Once the DNS was theirs, they pointed traffic to cloned payment pages. Where this failed was the domain registrar did not have sufficient multi-factor verifications during transfers. The merchant storefronts did not detect any anomaly for sudden DNS changes or admin config edits. And payment processors didn't flag a surge of new merchant account creations with suspicious cloned page content. The impact was direct and measurable financial loss of around 3.4 million that has been reported. There was a lot that was not reported. Plus, the less measurable and often damaging is the erosion of customer trust again and brand reputation. Some merchants did see an increase in chargeback spikes, which were triggering stricter processor scrutiny. Why it all matters to us. This wasn't just a payment systems bug in the classic sense. It was a peripheral platform that failed, and the result was a full compromise of the payments flow. In your DNS or admin panel, when that gets popped up, it doesn't matter how PCI compliant your payment gateway is, you've already lost by that point. So some key learnings from all of these case studies is that one of the biggest silent risks in complex systems isn't a misconfigured setting or a buggy dependency. It's unclear ownership. When no one knows who's responsible for something, that's where problems often get unnoticed. So ownership brings accountability, and accountability brings action. When ownership is murky, tasks get dropped, edge cases get ignored, vulnerabilities go unaddressed. Security failures don't often come from where we don't know, but from what we think someone else is handling. Whether it's infrastructure, code paths, workflows, or even documentation, every part of the system needs a clear owner. Not a team, not a vague department, a person, or a well-defined group with responsibility and clear visibility. The most dangerous issues don't live within the team scope. They live between scopes. Think of all the places where responsibility gets fuzzy. Cross-team integrations, cloud service boundaries, vendor-managed components. Those are the seams where the real risk accumulates. Make it someone's job to watch over these seams and assign ownership even before it becomes an issue. Think of your payment flow like a relay race. If you drop the baton between teams or vendors, the attacker doesn't just pick it up, they run straight into your bank account. Clarity in ownership isn't just operational hygiene, it is a core part of your threat model. You're not just building software, you're building accountability structures around it. Gaps are like free real estate for attackers. If no one owns that logging pipeline, that webhook handler, or the deprecated endpoint, then the attacker does. And trust me, attackers don't need a job description or even a handoff meeting to get started. When we talk about securing systems, especially something as critical as payments, it's not just about our own code. It's about everything we depend on. And that's where things often get risky. Think about all the external components we integrate with. APIs for fraud detection, third-party SDKs for analytics or marketing, SaaS platforms for customer data, or the subscription billing service. Each one brings value, but each one also expands the attack surface. Dependencies aren't just in a package JSON or a requirements TXT. They're real. They're running code, often outside our direct control, that can fail, be misconfigured, and become security liabilities. Think of them as roommates with keys to your house. Most are friendly, but if one of them forgets to lock the door, everyone's at risk. This one's crucial. The checkout flow is sacred. It's where trust, security, and revenue all converge. If any dependency interacts with it, visibly or invisibly, it becomes part of your security boundary. A single vulnerability script can open doors to injection attacks. a misbehaving API can leak PII or expose the payments logic. Even a delayed response can erode customer trust or cause failed transactions. Payments are like a relay of trust. If anything in the chain gets compromised, it's game over. Attackers don't need to break your code if they can hijack the services that you trust. We can't secure what we don't know we depend on. And that's why we need to sort of maintain a living inventory of something that is regularly updated and not just a stale spreadsheet lying in one of your wiki or Confluence pages. Dependencies change all the time. Document every dependency. Track versions, data flows, ownership, and risk level. Monitor changes. Set alerts when something updates or deprecates. Treat this like your system's bill of materials. When incidents happen, and they will, you don't want to be scrambling to figure out what things depend on. You want answers instantly. Your inventory is your map. Without it, you are flying blind in a storm. This one is one of the most important lessons we've learned. Testing isn't a luxury or something that you get to after the fun parts are done. It's foundational. If you're shipping code without serious testing, you're not building software, you're gambling. This starts with mindset. Testing isn't about a checkbox, it's about simulating reality. It is easy to fall into the trap of just writing enough tests to hit coverage metrics, but real testing goes way deeper. Are you testing edge cases, failed modes, race conditions? Are you covering scenarios that span multiple systems? That's what it means to test like when you mean it. It's about being intentional and relentless. Most catastrophic failures don't happen in isolated modules. They happen at integration points. Those are your blind spots. APIs, third-party services, internal handoffs, anywhere the systems interact. They're often where assumptions live, and assumptions are dangerous. Are both systems handling timeouts the same way? Are retries idempotent? Is the authentication consistent? These are the kind of things that can break silently and catastrophically. If you're not testing for failure, you're trusting luck. Chaos testing is about intentionally injecting failures into your system, killing services, throttling bandwidth, introducing latencies, and seeing what happens. You don't start with a big bang. You start small. Kill a service in staging, black hole a dependency, and observe, learn, and iterate. Chaos testing uncovers fragility you didn't even know existed. We have to move past the idea that testing is a task to get through. It's part of our culture, our discipline, and commitment to building resilient systems. And especially in high-stakes environments like payments and security, anything less than serious testing is a risk we just can't afford. Too often, security is treated like a bolt-on, something we get to after an architecture is finalized, after the product is built, and maybe even right before launch. That mindset doesn't work anymore, not in today's threat landscape. This analogy says it all. You can't bake a secure system by sprinkling on controls at the end. If security isn't a fundamental part of your design process, if it's not in the flower, then you're always playing catch up. That means thinking about authentication, authorization, data handling, audit trails, and abuse vectors at the whiteboarding stage. not just at the QA. Your end-to-end workflows need to be secure, not just the payment systems. Because in payments, your security is only as strong as the weakest integration. And oftentimes, you don't even know where that is yet. Security-first architecture means that you're not asking how fast can we build this, you're asking how safe is this to build, maintain, and operate over time. It means asking where does data flow? What are the blast radius if the component is compromised? Are we applying least privilege from day one? Are we assuming breaches and limiting lateral movement? Every design decision is a security decision. Are you using managed services? Great. Do they meet your compliance standards? Are you using internal tools? Cool. Do you log and access errors appropriately? When something goes wrong, and eventually something will, it's too late to start thinking through your response plan. Have your incident response strategy documented. Have roles and responsibilities well mapped out. Run tabletop exercises. Practice detection and recovery before you are under pressure. Security incidents are as much about response as they are about prevention, and your preparation is what turns disaster into a recoverable event. In payments, your security parameter isn't just the payment stack. It is every single upstream and downstream platform that touches your customers. Thank you all for your time today. This is all I had. Any questions?
I have a quick one.
Sure.
How do you kind of plan for, so if you're a merchant, for example, there's so many dependencies in your chain. How do you kind of plan for things going wrong with you, right? Like actually, for example, when you domain registrar, like people are often not aware of that, so how do you help people kind of be aware of that?
So the question was that how do you plan for these? There are so many dependencies and so many things that payments depends on, external and internal. Where do you start? So the starting point is always when you're designing your systems, you have these protocols and the mindset baked in right from day one. You are prioritizing security, you are prioritizing testing, and you are prioritizing your documentation. You have your audit logs, you're making sure that you are aware of all your dependencies. And that's where I would say I would start the process and make it a consistent part of the process, so it's not something that we are doing in a one-off situation, especially after the incident occurs.